we know that Prabhupada had the heart attacks during that time. So he arrived, and during that time, he turned 70 years old. He observed his appearance day on that boat. So when he arrived in Boston Harbor, which is where you go through the formalities, was the first port of entry in America. So just like if you're flying back from India, maybe you're going like, I'm coming to Pittsburgh, but the plane touches down in Atlanta or Detroit, you have to get off and go through your formalities, and then you get back. So it was the same thing. Had to go through the formalities in Boston, and then, continue on to New York. So in Boston, he wrote that beautiful poem that many of us are familiar with. He said, I don't know why you brought me here. That's considered why you brought me here. The captain that took him off, went through the formalities, and took a little walk around. I don't know why you brought me here, but I'm your puppet. No, just make me dance, make me dance, make me dance. Of course, as young devotees, we were kind of this was a very romantic concept, I'm your puppet, make me dance. And when the devotee came up to Prabhupada, I'm just your puppet, Srila Prabhupada, I'm just your puppet. Prabhupada said, yes, I want you to dance this way, but you are dancing that way. But Srila Prabhupada was not that kind of puppet. When he arrived in New York, he commented, I didn't know which way to turn, right or left. And then this person came from the Traveler's Aid Society. In some airports, you'll see a little thing, Traveler's Aid. And, basically, what the best they can do is give you a phone number to get a hotel or help you get a bus or something. They don't do a whole lot if they, But that's what happened here. He came up and he met Prabhupada, and he had a ticket from New York to Butler, Pennsylvania, so he took him to the Port Authority bus station. So this was, he landed on the 17th of September, 1965. And you can say thus was the rather inconspicuous beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. Nobody here really knew he was staying at the home of the Agarwals. A gentleman from Mathura, and his wife Sally, who was an American lady, and they have a little daughter. So the other day I read a letter that Prabhupada had written to the Agarwal, but it was addressed to the daughter on her third birthday, and he was saying, Miss Kamala, it's your birthday, I should, give you something, but I'm a sannyasi, So I can give you my books, but, you're only 3 years old, so you can't read them, but I'll give them to your mother, and then she can hold them for you, so when you're older, then you can read these books, and achieve Krishna consciousness. Anyways, but he came, he had his trunk, and the trunk had the first volume in 3 parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that was the great treasure that he arrived with. So some of the accomplishments from that kind of innocuous beginning was that he's almost immediately, not almost immediately, because first there was again more struggle, just to find, just to deal with the whole transition of coming into a foreign place. And after a month he could understand if he was going to get anything done, Butler, Pennsylvania was not the place to do it. It was like a former steel town which had seen better days, and it was not prospering. People were polite. Prabhupada wrote the letter to him. Actually, the letter was written about a month after his arrival. So he said, the people they're hearing from me. He said, their English is a little difficult for me to understand, and mine is a little difficult for them to understand. He said, but still they like my English, and they listened. And he noted that he had, for the first time, had spoken in a church. He's speaking in various institutions. So he made the best of the situation, but he could understand that this was not a place. People were curious, but they weren't, it was more out of, you could say like a, sometimes a window shopping mentality, you go window shopping and you're not going to buy anything, you're just like checking it out. So that was kind of what the situation was. So he went back to New York City, and there was many struggles there, including the fact that his entire manuscript from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita was stolen, along with his typewriter. At a time when he was living, he had a space in an office building, which means there was no proper bathroom facility or anything. At that time, they did have some public baths, and I think that's probably where he went. When we first went to England, actually, we also were living in an office situation at one point, and we'd have to go a couple blocks to these public baths, which wasn't that bad once you got there, it was hot water. But anyways, that went on, and then finally, and so this is 65, he's meeting finally he's finding himself from the Upper West Side down to the Lower East Side, and he's going out to Tompkins Square Park. So you see that famous picture, he's under a tree, he has his hand like this to shade his eyes from the light. And this is the actual beginning of the Hare Krishna movement, was under this tree. There is a plaque noting that tree actually in Tompkins Square Park. And thanks to the Ritviks, actually, this one didn't do it, but the Ritviks did it. And, it was a permanent fixture in the park. And in 2016, next year, will be the 50th year of the incorporation of ISKCON. So this happened in 65 July. So back to the tree, Ramabhadra Prabhu has a grand plan to spread that tree all over the world. He has spoken to the curators of the park, the city, they take the city Department of Parks and Resources, whatever. So they have to, prune trees occasionally. So the next time they prune that tree, they're going to give the prunings to Ramabhadra, who's going to have them treated by somebody who knows how to do this thing, and then they'll be sent to different parts of the world to be replanted and are grafted onto another tree, so that this Adi tree, it's an American elm, will be in various places all around the world. So under this American elm, he had a little bongo drum, which is up at Prabhupada's palace, so you can take darshan of that little drum if you haven't already done so. And he started just sitting there and chanting. I'm 70 years old, under a tree in New York City. Tompkins Square Park was kind of an interesting place because it was actually a site of, it's a diverse ethnic situation there. And a lot of different movements or theological ideas or other type of, political ideas, you can say, have their roots there, because you could come to that park and stand on your soapbox and just get up and speak. So one thing that happened there is, as a result of somebody standing in their soapbox, was that actually women got to vote. It's starting in that little park, the original feminist movement, which earned women the right to vote. So now even more dramatic came the Hare Krishna movement, but it didn't have a name yet, just a little elderly gentleman from India on a drum sitting under this tree. So then a few people came around, and then they really liked it, and he would invite them, when he saw somebody standing there, he would indicate, you see the pictures, and you'll see that it's all kinds of people, not just, there's like these Orthodox Jews with their hat and a little thing, there's the Russian people with their babushkas, the ladies with their babushkas on their heads. There's different types of backgrounds in there, and you see the young hippie people, and people are, they're just looking with curiosity, and he saw that. So the young hippie people who were less reserved, they would step and then come forward, and then he would ask them to chant with them. And they began doing it, and they liked it. So they were coming every day. And then after a while, they realized, well, the winter is coming. And when the winter comes, we won't be able to come here and chant with Swami, and Swami won't be able to come here. So they talked among themselves, and they got this little storefront, 26 2nd Avenue, with the motto of that place is where it all began. That's a t-shirt, 26 2nd Avenue, where it all began. And then they eventually got the little apartment in the back. So at that point, he would actually invite any of the people that came, mostly young men at that point, come up to his place. He would cook for them. He would serve them. And then because they were so uncultured, they were just like, thank you, get up and leave their dirty plates on the floor and wash their dishes. It's almost, just seems like an unbelievable epic, Finally, one person was one of the newcomers, and he was observing this. And he just got up and left. So then he said, Swamiji, is there anything I can do to help? And Prabhupada replied, I thought you would never ask. So, little by little it became a little more, the others kind of woke up to the fact, maybe we should reciprocate with this kindness, There was a famous jar of ISKCON bullets. Of course, nowadays we probably get censored for mentioning bullets, it's like, especially if we're at an airport. But anyway, they would just have that jar there of globules. And people would drop in during the day. At lunch, there would be this lunch. The Prabhupada was writing to his friend. He was like, so these young boys, they're coming. And for the first time, they're eating rice, dal, sabjis, and chapatis, but they're liking it. They were eating meat and so many nasty things, but now they're taking Krishna Prasad and they're liking it. He sent young men, young ladies out into the street to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So inaugurating Harinam Sankirtan for the first time in the West. He initiated about 4,780 disciples, of which my daughter is one of them. When she was about 7 years old, I approached Srila Prabhupada after a darshan on the roof in Bombay, in Juhu, when we were not having our own premise yet, so we were staying in different facilities and in tents on the property. And Prabhupada was meeting people on the top of the roof of the complex he was staying. So after the one darshan, I went up to him, and I had been considering that, we read the Bhagavatam, we heard that just, shouldn't make dependence. In other words, don't become a mother, a father, a teacher, unless you can deliver your dependence. Well, now I had a dependent, and I could understand that, I wasn't really able to do that. So I thought the only hope, the only thing I can do that might save the situation is if Prabhupada would initiate my daughter. So with that in mind, I went up to him, and I waited for everyone to go, and he saw me standing, called me up, and I blurted out, will you initiate Saraswati? And he had named her, so he knew what I was talking about. Will you initiate Saraswati? And he said something that I probably should have said, what do you mean? But I was so intent on my mission, getting my daughter initiated, I didn't ask him. So he said to me, they are already initiated. So I said, but will you initiate Saraswati? So he said, bring beads. Well, I had beads, so I handed them. And I sat while he chanted on the beads. And then handed them back. It was very grave, and wasn't taking this lightly. He said her name will be, which it already was, Miss Saraswati Baby. So he said that she may sit in at the next prayer yajna. Now she was in, at that time, she was in Dallas, Liverpool. Then the school chain got closed down and she was sent to Europe, which I didn't find out until after the fact, actually. I was myself in traveling sanctifying in Europe. I was based in Europe, so her initiation happened at the same occasion for the installation of Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Lalita Vishaka. Now those deities are currently in Bangladesh, but they were originally bought from Amsterdam, and that's where they were installed. And the whole story about that, which no time to go into now, but short thing to be learned. Don't ever buy deities for your temple without going through your GBC. In this case, we not only bypass the GBC, we bypass through the Prabhupada. But at any rate, she was then sitting at that initiation and was formally initiated. So 4,780 disciples. He established 108 Krishna temples on 6 continents. And in one period, it was just like an amazing growth. You know, the book Hare Krishna Explosion by Hare Krishna. So I mean, it was an explosion that was happening. And between 1970 and 1971, there were 32 new temples established. That's approximately 3 a month. And out of those, you know, a good many of them would survive. And then one of the more significant achievements, which actually needs to get on the calendar. So we have like 1965 to 2015. That will be the 50th anniversary of the arrival of Srila Prabhupada, right? So then 2016, that is the 50th anniversary of the establishment of ISKCON. 2017, 50th, does anybody know what it will be? Fairly significant, because it's something that happens all over the world. Huh? Rath Yatra, exactly. So the first Rath Yatra was in July of 67 in San Francisco. And of course there's the whole story of how Lord Jagannath appeared, and the person who founded it didn't even know what it was, just it was made in India, so was thinking, well, this is made in India, Swamiji's from India, Pallavis from, literally, I was thinking, Pallavis from India, you know, all these nice Mahamantras from India, and took this little thing. And then when Mukunda and Shamsundar brought this little thing, which was sitting on a shelf in our house, to Srila Prabhupada, just like I'm using a harmonium, he was sort of like a little desk here. He had his metal trunk that he kept his belongings in. So that was his desk. And they brought it in and put it down on that desk, and to their astonishment, he made his obeisances. Now, some little wooden figurine, they just wanted to know what it was, and then he was making obeisances. So, and he says, who has brought? You know, they looked at each other, it's Malati, you know, oh, bring her, call her. So somebody came, I was down in the kitchen cooking, so they called me up. So when I first saw that little figurine there, because I didn't know why I was being called up. Actually, there was an elevator, I ran, because in those days, because I was so young, I could run faster than the elevator. I ran up. But when I walked in and I saw that little figurine, I was like, uh-oh. Because previously to that, you know, we had all been, many of us, myself, one of them, had been participating in the, you know, we were like non-card carriers of the hippie sampradaya, you know, we just followed that type of lifestyle. And one of the moods of the hippies was nothing belongs to anyone, which was kind of true, but we didn't connect to it belong to, just nothing belongs to anyone. And sometimes we would liberate things, which was a polite term for stealing. Becoming devotees, of course, then we got that little connection. But then we also found out we can do anything but Krishna, right? So at the time, when I was in the early part of the San Francisco days, I was the cook, and the cook meant you also had to get all the boga, and which meant you needed some money or something to like barter, barter with. And so various ways and means were employed, including collecting bottles off the street and printing. In those days, you get 3 cents a bottle, 2 cents a bottle, and get a shopping cart full of bottles, and you pay for one afternoon day at Prasad, because we were up to 100 people would drop in for our free meal in the afternoon. We served in meantime, and being honorable hippies didn't have any money, so we had to figure out some way to get the supplies. We had to also adjust to a new type of cooking, which meant we use ghee now instead of some kind of cheap oil. And ghee is a little costly, right? So, which, you make your own those days, so butter's a little costly. But Krishna so kindly arranged that a dairy truck would stop right in front of our temple every day, a dairy delivery. And the driver would get out and he would take his little delivery across the street to a little convenience store that was on the corner. So since you can do anything for Krishna, I would come out of the temple while he was over at the store and take 2 pounds of butter out of the back of the truck. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Weekends were off. So I was doing that, and one day, Prabhupada's apartment was facing the street. So one day I was up in his apartment, and he said, Malati, every day I see you're going to a truck. What are you doing? He was just asking like that. But something in me, like I felt a little funny when he questioned me. So I answered him, but a little cautiously. I said, I'm getting better. It's true, I was getting better. I didn't lie, but his reply was, yes, Krishna was also a butter thief. And when he said that, I got the purport, because we were already learning that, while Krishna was doing so many activities, he had this human-like form, but he was divinity, and we couldn't imitate him. So when he said that, I understood that Krishna could do this, but I should not. So from that point on, I gave up that habit. But I had already taken this little figurine. And therefore, when I saw that in front of, on his desk, I was thinking, oh no, busted again, So I was feeling this hesitancy, and I walked, I stood there, and Prabhupada said, so you have found? Yes. Yeah. And he said, were there others? So I started to feel a little relieved, he didn't ask me how I got them, so were there others? And there had been 3 barrels, and each one had these little figurines in it, but each one was different. So I said, yes, lots, but they were like a barrel full. So I was a little, yes, lots. And he remained very sober. He says, no, 2 others different. So I remembered the white face and the yellow face, and said, yes. And he said, bring them. And then he turned to Shamsundar, and he said, this is Lord Jagannath. Jagannath means Lord of the universe. This is Krishna. And he said the 2 others were his brother and sister, Balaram and Subhadra. And then he turned to Shamsundar and he said, so Shamsundar, can you carve large? And he made an indication with his hand. So immediately Shamsundar was yes. Now Shamsundar, he went to college and he had a degree in German philosophy and literature. 2 very impractical degrees as far as supporting yourself in this world, actually. And so,
What kind of philosophy?
German Just, I don't remember, philosophy. Never he had that whole, no, German was German literature and philosophy, that's all I know. Never he used to have those debates with Prabhupada. There was a book out about, they would, so. Anyways, so on the practical level, you have to pay the rent type of thing. He would sometimes do carpentry type of work. So he liked working with wood. He liked matching grains, and he liked wood. So here was something made of wood. So yes, he never carved something, but yes, I can do it. And this is something that is very significant in that it shows how Prabhupada would empower people, would empower his young disciples to do things that they ordinarily would not have done or would not have been able to do. But because of our desire to please him, we would be able to accomplish things that were seemingly outside of our realm. Or sometimes even seemed outside the realm of practicality. Like an example of that was there was a god sister who became a god sister, but a young lady, she was 16 years old, and her brother was a devotee. His name was Krishnadas. He was a couple of years older than her, and he was one of the early San Francisco devotees. And he had this young sister, and she had not been well treated by her mother. When she was born, the mother didn't want this child, so she gave birth and walked out of the hospital, leaving the baby behind. So the social welfare people eventually brought, the girl and her mother and father together again, but mother never treated her very well, and she used to keep the girl out of school, force her to be, absent from school, and then send her out shoplifting, which was not the best situation for a young girl. So she got a copy of the original, the Nolan Bhagavad Gita from her brother, and she was very attracted by this. And so her brother brought her to the temple, and she liked it. She liked it so much. But, the mother didn't like it too much. So during the darshan with Srila Prabhupada, Krishnadas asked Srila Prabhupada, asked Swamiji, is there something that we could do for my sister? Her name was Sarah. There's something we can do for Sarah. Because her life is, is miserable under the circumstance, and, she's attracted to Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada thought for a moment, and he goes, well, maybe Shamsundar and Malati can adopt her. So, I was all of 21 years old, and my husband was like 24 years old. And we didn't think that would, so immediately, yes. Yes. I mean, I don't know if you have any idea how much difficult it is to remove a child from the parental home. We didn't think of any of that. Just the very next day, I went down to the city courthouse. I found the papers. I got I went through the whole process to apply. We got a court date. We went to court. The mother was there. The mother and father weren't together anymore, but the father was there. We were all there. The girl was there. The judge calls us up one by one into the chambers and speaking. Then she deliberates, and then she comes out, and she goes, well, this may sound a little unusual, but I'm awarded, this may sound a little unusual. The daughter is 16, and the mother is 21, 22 I think by that point. She says, but I'm awarding custody to this couple. She goes like that, so suddenly we had, I was pregnant, and I suddenly had a 16-year-old daughter. And so she was initiated, and her name became Saradia. Which is interesting because my daughter was born on the same day as Saradia. So when it happened, when we used to have all the devotees come to the temple on her birthday, and we would chant and we'd make a cake, and make a big deal out of it. So she was looking forward to her birthday, like the mother's in the hospital having a baby. And then my daughter, so on the same day, then Srila Prabhupada named my daughter Saraswati, so that Sarah, the names are very similar. anyway, that was, another example of, being empowered to do something that ordinarily would not have been attainable. But by Prabhupada's desire and our enthusiasm to actually, please him, we were able to accomplish that. And of course, we also realized it wasn't us. We were going through the motions, but it was really through Prabhupada. In fact, one other time, due to a situation, my husband and I had to go to prison, and it was from something that had occurred previous to our joining the movement. And so first of all, my husband went to tell Shamsundar went to tell Prabhupada, Swamiji, Malati and I have to go away for a while. And so he said, oh, where are you going? He was hoping he wouldn't ask. And he goes, well, we have to go to prison. So Prabhupada said, oh, that's all right. Krishna was born in prison. And he says, Stephen, just chant Hare Krishna. You'll be all right. And so then we actually had this 5-year sentence. Oh, then Prabhupada asked him, so what happened? And so this is, well, Swamiji, was selling drugs. And the hippies, that was a considered a viable occupation. So Prabhupada said, oh, that's all right. I was also a drug dealer. Because he had his pharmacy, right? Wasn't quite the same. But anyways, so we were there and had that big sentence, and then on the 24th day, and it was Christmas Eve, we went in on December 1st, Christmas Eve day, we got released unexpectedly. It was like, no, even this lady came in and told me to sign this papers, and I was like, what is it? Because I learned really fast, be careful what you agree to or what you sign. So I said, what is it? And she goes, I don't care if you don't want to get out of here, but I'm your parole officer, and I don't agree with this, but the judge says that you're to be released. So I signed it. And we were up in Portland, Oregon, in Seattle, Washington, and we were flying back down, and Mukunda happened to call a friend of ours, a mutual friend that was up there, so he found out we were coming back, but there was no way otherwise to notify anybody. So he met us at the airport, and he said, Swamiji's here, and he wants to see you right away. So changed clothes, we went in, and when I went into his apartment, there was like a door that went into the room he was, and I kind of opened that door. It's like a door with glass, like the door in that office in the, out there in the foyer. So the first door over there where they have the doors with the glass windows. So it was that kind of a door. And I opened it up and I kind of looked around and Prabhupada looks, he goes, oh, Malati, I was just thinking 5 years was too much. I was thinking last night 5 years was too much. So we never understood, on the material end of things, it wasn't clear what happened, but when Prabhupada said that, we could understand. So one of the other things that, he established, he told us, started off to talk about Rock after this little detour. So he told us, he had Shamsundar card with deities. The deities were installed, but installed in a very simple manner, not like with all the 3 to 5 day ceremonies and pratishtha's and this ceremony, that ceremony, and 108 fiery yajnas. Actually, they were under Prabhupada's instructions. He said there should be a high platform. They didn't use the word altar yet. They didn't use the word vyasa sign yet, so high platforms. So Shamsundar kind of took that extremely literally, and it was so high you had to get up on a ladder. And then it says there should be a covering with an umbrella, so there's like a half umbrella, and he said it should be blue with gold fringe. So Shamsundar built the frame, and Durina and Harshani put the covering on with the fringe. So the deities were placed up, and one more thing, he told us there should be lights. So Shamsundar had 3 lights, red, blue, and green. And you put these little things in between the light socket and the light fixture, and the lights are like blinking one after the other. Then he told me, so you have to get plates from now on. Everything you cook must be offered to him. So then he goes, you must get, if you can, silver plates. He said, one large plate is a goblet, means with a stem, right? A spoon and 2 bowls. And then he looked at me and he said, plates that no one else has ever eaten off of. Because he understood by this point that the hippies were really champion recyclers. And for example, on the platform, what we would now call the Rasa sign, was a raised platform that Shamsundar built. We suddenly thought, well, it's a little hard just sitting on the wood. So somebody ran outside because they remember seeing a discarded sofa on the side of the street, and they grabbed the pillow, So we would, use things that had been already used. So therefore he had to tell me with regards to deities to make sure the plates had never been used before. And everything would be offered to them. So at that time is when we actually began the more formal type of offering of the boga. Up until that point in time when the boga was offered, we would just bring the whole pots into the center of the temple room. And the temple room was probably from this pillar, it was a little narrow, not even as far as that wall, maybe as far as the Rasa sign there. And we'd bring the pots out from the kitchen, put them down, and everybody would just kind of bow down. So they'd ring a bell, and we'd all chant together, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Bo. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. And it wasn't a set number of times, just until we felt like, okay, it's offered now. So now, when Jagannath was here, we started with the prayers, Namo Vishnu Padaya, but we didn't have the second prayer yet. And then Namo Mahavananaya, and Namo Brahmanaya Bible, and Manintaya. So that became, the beginning of the established offer first of the deities, these prayers, wait some time. So in late mid-June, sometime in June, he told us about the Yatra festival. He was amazed. So anyway, it was quite close to the festival, and it was going to be on the 19th of July that year. So he told us it would be very nice if we held the Rath Yatra festival. And he drew a picture of the cart, and he said they had 3 of these carts, and they were hand-pulled carts, and he didn't give us the exact dimensions in meters or feet, but let us know they were very big. So because it was kind of late by that point to actually build 3 carts, or any cart actually, that first year we got a permit from the city to have the parade, but we borrowed a truck from our next door neighbors to the temple. There was this group of I don't know exactly what you'd call them. So they were into contrary politics. They were always fighting the labor unions, and they were against the establishment, you could say. And they were called the Diggers, D-I-G-G-E-R-S. And the Hells Angels used to, which was like a motorcycle gang, they used to hang out there too. And so we were passing out free meals at noon. They also would pass out free food, but kind of sporadically. And in fact, one point, it was kind of funny, the Hells Angels started imitating the Maha Mantra. They heard it as Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, not Harleys for the motorcycle, so they were hearing Hare Krishna, so they would happily chant Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, so they never threatened us. A lot of people were intimidated by them. Anyway, our first Rath Yatra came, and it was on the back. They had a flatbed truck, so they loaned it to us. Shamsundar built a canopy over, so for the deities were under a canopy, but each one was facing a different direction. And then behind them, they had a kirtan party that had a small portable amplifier, so you could actually hear the kirtan. And the grand feast we had this Prabhupada should distribute lots of prasadam. So the only thing I could think of as a cook that we could afford to do was chapatis, because basically chapatis are flour and water, right? So I determined we were going to make 1,000 chapatis, and that was my goal. And somehow we pulled that off, so they were pretty crispy the next day, more like matzahs, but the thing was that was interesting about that experience was I was asking people to help, and I realized, oh, you need these rolling pins, but I only had a couple of them. So I sent some of these, when I asked people to help, it was just like hippies always coming in and out of the temple, so hey, can you help us? We're going to feed a lot of people tomorrow at this festival. So, practically everybody said, sure. But I had 2 rolling pins, and I realized things weren't going to get done. So I said, go out and get some wine bottles, because there was always wine bottles all over the street. So they brought back a few wine bottles, and I washed them off, and then I put them, fill them with water, make some weight, put the lid on tight, and we used these wine bottles to roll the chapatis. But, none of them had actually rolled anything before. So they were not too round, they were all kinds of shapes, and they would have holes, and it didn't matter, we got done. And we threw in these boxes, and we were filling up with these interesting looking chapatis. And the next day, during the parade, we were going out. We had baskets, we managed to get baskets full of these. By now they're really, very hard. You could like a cracker. But it was Krishna Prasada that had been offered to Lord Jagannath, and we would go up to people and say, here, take this as sacred food, it's spiritual food, and if you eat this food, you become spiritualized. You can go back to Gaia, and this is the power of Prasada. This is what Prasada is. It's not mundane food, it's not food at all, it's Prasada, which means the Lord's mercy. And we had such faith in it. Nobody ever said, what's in that? Is there sugar? Is it vegan? It's just, it's prasada. Please take it, It was wonderful. And the thing that was interesting, usually like Rath Yatra, it's like I was at Rath Yatra last weekend in Puerto Rico, and wonderful prasada by Shankar, our former cook here, well cooked, well done. And you still see people, they'll take a plate and they, toss it, and you'll see it here and there. For some reason, these really weird, dry, tasteless chapatis, people didn't throw them away. They somehow or other they accepted them and ate that prasadam. So I always remember that, because prasadam is powerful, and Lord Jagannath's prasadam is very powerful. And somehow or other, I'm sure every one of the persons who accepted those chapatis got some immense spiritual benefit. So, getting back to some of Prabhupada's accomplishments, in addition to the Rath Yatra festival, the next year, by the way, in '68, we had a hand-pulled cart. Shamsundar and Jayananda pulled that cart together. And another thing that happened at that, so the second Rath Yatra was the first time Jagannath Sugadagala wore hand-sewn clothes. When they were installed, they just had on their natural painting. And then Prabhupada told to that Rath Yatra that we must dress them. Sundar said, you mean cover up the paint? He was very proud of how very carefully replicated the paint, So Prabhupada drew a picture, and Jindal and Harsharani then created the dress. So another thing Prabhupada did was that he introduced a very high standard of Radha Krishna Devi worship all over the world, and including Africa, and so many wonderful installations. So this one installation in Africa, Radha and Krishna came. So Krishna was black marble and Radharani was white. And the devotees there had not seen any deities before. So the only devotees who had seen deities were the ones that had come from, somewhere else, like America or Europe. So they told the devotees, go get these wigs, Krishna needs some hair. So they went out, and we were in Africa, so the only kind of hair they could find was like an Afro wig. So So they brought this afro wig back, and they put it on Krishna. And Prabhupada was noting it, and he goes, yes, sometimes Krishna takes on the characteristics of the local people. He's approved and instituted brahmachari ashrams, which are now notably absent in ISKCON, but he did establish brahmachari ashrams so the ladies who were sincere and wanting to practice Krishna consciousness would have a place to convene and practice Krishna consciousness. And he instructed the disciples how to begin an incense business, including making incense, and this would provide financial support for the temples. And he introduced the Sunday Love Feast, like now we all have our Sunday feast as a standard, but those times it was called the Sunday Love Feast. And that was because Prabhupada would watch really closely how things were going, how people behaved, what the customs were. He'd ask this question, so he asked Kirtanananda, what do the people do on Sunday? And he said, well, families get together and they eat together. And Prabhupada liked that idea. He said, yes, we should also do like that. So then, because it was that era, so they inserted love feast. The Sunday love feast became an established tradition. I personally think we should start calling it the love feast again, because I think this world needs a little love. And then he created the world's first chain of vegetarian restaurants, which is Govinda's. And he spoke daily on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, delivering thousands of lectures worldwide, of which there's 2,200 that are archived and available. And then he had hundreds of informal conversations about the science of Krishna consciousness with disciples, guests, and friends, and there's over 1,300 of these available. And I would like to say, of these, one of the most, I would say, instructive series, the morning walk series, because on the morning walks he would be with his close disciples, the leaders of the movement and others, and there was freedom to ask questions, or even he would ask questions to provoke the mind and intelligence of his disciples, and they would have little debates. But here he would be discussing how to do things, how to preach, and he would be giving, pointers. So there's a lot of practical Krishna conscious application information in these morning walks. He recorded 20 albums of devotional music, kirtans and bhajans, and I really think that should be required listening for everybody in the movement before they get initiated, so they actually understand that what is kirtan, what is bhajan. It's not a musical experience, but it's a deeply meditative experience, and nothing really presents as much as Srila Prabhupada just what is kirtan, what is bhajan. But when you're hearing him chant, the depth of it is very penetrating. And began Back to Godhead magazine, which at that point he started in 1944, and somehow or other it's continuing to this day. And then established major temples in Bombay, Vrindaban, as focal points. He wanted these temples to be like places where people would notice, that they would come to, and actually that's what's happened. And then he, of course, established the world headquarters at Srila Mayapur. And any one of these centers, if you go to at any given day, you will find so many people gathering. And it's not at all unusual, especially in the Jew temple, to find Western men and women from all countries just coming, because if you Google ISKCON Delhi, or you just Google Delhi, what to do in Delhi, they'll mention ISKCON. What to do in Bombay, they'll mention ISKCON. Because it's seen as a cultural phenomenon. And of course, for those who are seeking, then you have the deep religious aspect. He established gurukuls. He established the Bhaktivedanta Institute to establish Krishna consciousness, or to advance the Krishna consciousness within the scientific community. And he established the Bhaktivedanta Institute, Bhaktivedanta Swami Charitable Trust. And this is a special trust that is established to find places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and restore them. So this is interesting because Lord Chaitanya sent the 6 Goswamis to Vrindaban, and one of their mandates was to find the places of Lord Krishna's pastimes and restore them. So following, in that same mood, Srila Prabhupada has, through his charitable trust, ISKCON has been able to restore and preserve so many places of pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. He counseled his disciples in complex managerial, philosophical, personal issues, and he wrote, and there is archived, over 6,000 letters. Now, keep in mind, this is pre-computer, pre-word processor. This starting out with little, handwriting and then typewriter, the kind of ching, have to change the ribbon. 6,000 letters. And when you get into these letters, very deep, very, very informative information. And there's over 30,000 archived photos. This you can get on the internet. Just like there's some sites just dedicated to photos of Srila Prabhupada. It's probably one of the more photographed personalities in this world. He wrote approximately 70 books on the science of Krishna consciousness, and this was only because he slept very little, very few hours per day. And considering now this is going on while he's doing all these other things. Dozens of prominent scholars and educators from leading universities have praised his work, and the Encyclopedia Britannica proclaimed that his voluminous translations from the original Sanskrit and his lucid commentaries have astounded the literary and academic communities worldwide. And this is even more astonishing because considering English was his second language, In 1972, he established the BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and by 1976, over 55 million pieces of literature in various languages, at that point 25 languages, have been distributed worldwide, and it has become the largest publisher of Indian religious and philosophical texts. Now there is, I forget how many languages, it's a little over, there's over 100 languages. And one of the more remarkable accomplishments within the last few years, like within the last 4 years, happened when the government of China published Srimad Bhagavatam. Like we say, not a blade of grass, Krishna says, not a blade of grass moves without my sanction. In China, not a book is published without the sanction of the government, and they publish it. So, and they are adamantly prohibit any religious literature. But they became convinced of the philosophical soundness of the Srimad Bhagavatam and of the cultural significance. So the government of China published Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam. And that was through the hard efforts of disciples of His Holiness Sri Krishna. And then, of course, there was the most amazing, this could be an entire class about the Chaitanya Chaitamrita episode where 17 volumes of Chaitamrita were completed and published in 2 months' time. And this story deserves to be encapsulated that they were walking and probably sitting on his hands and sending these manuscripts and just collecting dust in the armoire. So I wanted to publish it. I'm not writing these, I'm not translating to collect dust. So 3 of them went over there talking and then come back. Okay, Srila Prabhupada, we can do it. In 2 or 3 years we can do it. Prabhupada stopped. He says 2 or 3 years, 2 months. And just, knee-jerk reaction was impossible. And it's impossible. And Prabhupada, with his dry comment, impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. Does anybody know the name of who's the philosopher? You should know that, some sister, I can't remember his name. I don't know really. No, it's like ancient philosopher.
Oh, Greek.
Something like that, yeah. Anyway, so he's quoting, Prabhupada was very well read, so impossible is the word in the Fool's Dictionary. So they were feeling quite, we'll do this in 2 or 3 years, and suddenly, so they went away and put their heads together, and then came back and said, all right, Srila Prabhupada. And, nowadays you talk a lot about teamwork, but this was teamwork. It's an incredible story. How 24 hours a day, we're not talking theoretically, but 24 hours a day, like the 7-Eleven store is open, these devotees came together and were doing anything and everything it took to get these books going. So all the best devotees in different things, the typesetters, the typists, the painters, the artists, people who could cook, people who could run errands, people who could do laundry, whatever you could do, you were put into a 24 hours time slot. So like if I was at the time setting, from such and such time to X time, the other person would be standing there and you just the seat didn't have time to get cold. And it was 24 hours a day. And, if there was someone to do your laundry, so you didn't have to worry about that. There was somebody to bring you prasadam, so you didn't have to worry about that. There was somebody, if you had a kid, somebody to mind your kid. But the whole focus, united effort was on getting this accomplished. And so it was wonderful success. The painters, they gave up their egos. You make a painting, you put your name at the bottom. They put up easels, one after the other. And whoever was really good in landscapes, they did landscapes. Whoever was good with water scenes, they put the water. Whoever was good with buildings, they put the buildings. Whoever was good with figures, they would put the figures. And even then, it was even more, there were some people who were good at hands, so they did the hands, or the feet, or the face, And they just gave up their egos to produce these wonderful, beautiful illustrations. There was only one artist who was given the carte blanche, okay, they could do their own, because they couldn't accept that one. Everybody else just went for it. So this was a very high level of spiritual consciousness, actually. And my own experience in that was in going to London, when we just kept together and stuck together to complete that mission there, regardless of whatever our personal feelings or conditions might be at the time. So Srila Prabhupada circled the globe 14 times. He visited 24 countries. This is between, this would be between 65 and 77. And during that time, making countless public appearances before multitudes of people. And in accomplishing all of that, he satisfied the orders of the Guru Maharaj, and he fulfilled the prediction of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that in every town and village the chanting of my name will be heard. And he also brought to life the premonition of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who was saying that very soon the unparalleled path of Harinam Sankirtan will be propagated all over the world. And they commented, oh, when will that day come? Unfortunately, English, French, Russian, German, and American people will take up the banner and mandungas and kartals and raise kirtan throughout their streets and towns. When will that day come? So Srila Prabhupada was able to not only satisfy his Guru Maharaj, but Lord Chaitanya and the previous acharyas. And our life has been made fortunate because of his loyalty and adherence to the instructions of his Guru Maharaj. So a few things. Anybody has any questions or comments?
I was wondering if you had heard something at that time regarding what Srila Prabhupada's desire was in relation to the Bhaktivedanta Institute. What
he said during that time, do you know of any instructions about the Bhaktivedanta Institute?
Myself personally, no, not just the broader term instructions that he discussed at that time to give, that the BBT, for example, had to give a certain sum to them. And of course, he was very keen on presenting opposition to the materialistic impression of scientists. You know. And the Bhaktivedanta Institute is still existing, and